It's Thursday. Is it Thursday? Yeah, it's Thursday. And welcome to Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis, and it's just after 9 here on the West Coast. It's just after 12 Eastern, and it's the 9th of December. So door 9 will be open today in your Advent calendar. And thanks for joining the show. You got me till, for 2 hours, basically, which will go by in a flash. So let's kind of whiz straight in with some of the action. Carla's producing from London. I'm in Los Angeles. And wherever you are, you can join us just by jumping on the web chat, backchannel.tv. Or you can, of course, talk to your Echo Show device. Just say the wake-up word followed by say and then your message. We're also streaming live on YouTube as well. We're going to look at redistricting today. We were going to do it yesterday and ran out of time, so we're going to do that today. Ask what it is, why do we do it, why does it matter, who's in charge, what about diversity, what is gerrymandering? We'll be answering all of those questions, hopefully not as quickly as that. We're also going to look at the Capital Riots back January 6th, nearly a year ago now, and still the perpetrators have not been prosecuted. You know, I don't really see the people that, like the guy wearing the horns, he kind of became the face of that whole movement, didn't he? Although he was, really just a pawn in the game. But, nearly 600 people now have been charged with various things. And yet the perpetrators, the actual organizers, nothing. So we're going to talk about that and take a little look at it as lawmakers are going to hold the ex-Trump chief of staff in contempt. We'll look at that story. That's Mark Meadows, of course, who's now suing the January 6th committee with this ridiculous lawsuit. We'll look at that. Also, the latest in the Elaine Maxwell trial. Let's not forget Trump tried to have her pardoned. It's just the whole thing. It's all connected, isn't it? So the trial is suspended. We'll bring you the latest on what's happened so far. There was a photograph yesterday released of her massaging Jeffrey Epstein's feet. It was disgusting. It was disgusting. Oh, her lawyer's gone sick. That's interesting. Interesting timing and all. And also born on this day in 1906, the African Grace Hopper. African-American, I should say. Computer genius who enabled people to fly to the moon through her pioneering computer programming, and one of the people depicted in the movie Hidden Figures. So we're going to talk about her life because, we do like to highlight some great Americans and also great immigrants who have gone on to become great Americans. So that's kind of how it's looking. We're going to jump straight into the newspaper review. We'll start with the Los Angeles Times this morning. And California's climate fight needs your kitchen waste is the headline there. That's right. Trash never dies. Sounds like the name of a James Bond movie. Maybe the latest one, if you've seen it. I'm choking a little bit this morning. Just a mild choke. Davey, good morning. In Texas, nice to know that you're up and about so early. I suppose you're 3 hours behind us. Are you 3 hours or 2 hours? I think maybe 2 hours. No, 9, 10. No, you're 3 hours. I'm just learning time zones. It's difficult for me, I'm a simple migrant with a small head, large brain. You see it running out of my ears. I need a head transplant for all these random things that I remember and nothing of any use. That's become a bit of a game on this show. It's like, what's the most random thing I can remember from years gone by that has no relation to anything in present? Weird. Maybe you're the same. Yes, the concept behind a state law in California that on January 1st will require Californians to separate organic material from other garbage. It's a landmark reform that aims to transform the state's throwaway culture, not just to ease pressure on landfills, but reduce the climate warming fallout of our trashy norm. A lot of countries already do this. I mean, England and some places in England do it. The different councils and different boroughs do it, where you're given 3 bins. So currently here, we have 3 bins here. We have to do garden waste, recycling in the blue, and then regular waste in the black. But what they're suggesting now is organic matter, and this happens in London, as we get a 4th bin for organic matter, because there's no point in throwing away like the shells of an egg if they can go in the organic matter box. My concern with all of this recycling is that the council or the city or the local authority, they actually sometimes just throw the whole lot into landfill. Because, the price of recyclable materials is volatile. And so if the trading price is down, they're like, well, we might as well just junk it this week. And that's my worry. Today is bin day here, by the way. The sweet sound of bin day. I actually love hearing the trucks in the distance because they don't come nearby because I don't have really a road nearby. But I hear the trucks in the distance taking away all the garbage. And I'm like, be gone. It's a hobby of mine. Senate Bill 1383 mandates that Californians toss unused food, coffee grounds, eggshells, banana peels, and other leftovers into bins they use for other green waste, such as garden trimmings, lawn clippings, and leaves. Oh wow, it's going in the green bin. It's not even a new bin. Now that is interesting. I mean, I'm totally down for that, but it's going to stink, isn't it? It's going to stink. Because, I'm going to have to need to put another bin in the kitchen to separate those things. But am I allowed to put a bag into that bin? Or do I have to pour the food waste on top of the garden waste? Because that's going to stink. Oh, man. This is quite complex now. I'll do it, obviously. It says waste haulers will divert the organic material away from traditional landfills to facilities that will turn the biological mishmash into products such as compost, mulch, mulch, and natural gas. A little bin, yeah. That's a good idea. Compostable bags. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll just carry the cost of that. No worries. Don't worry. I've got that. I've got the cost of the compostable bags. Does that mean I can also put, diapers in there as well? No. Executive order tackles emissions is the headline here. President Biden on Wednesday signed an executive order to make the federal government carbon neutral by 2050. I'll be honest, that's in 29 years' time? 29 years' time. It's not soon enough. I don't understand why it has to take that long. 10 years, max. 10 years. Just do it. And if they're worried about vehicles, there must be a company that's selling conversion kits to mass produce something that's the same shape as an engine that is actually an electric motor with a battery in it. Come on, please. They reckon that they're aiming for 65% reduction in planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and an all-electric fleet of cars and trucks 5 years later. The White House said the order shows the government will leverage its scale and procurement power to lead by example. Really? Really? 29 years? I don't know. The problem is, you'll have Trump winning the next election and all of this will be cancelled. All of it. He left the Paris Climate Accord without even reading it, and now we've rejoined. He's just going to cancel it again. It's going to happen. A growing list of vanishing activists are also on the front of the Los Angeles Times this morning. In Beijing, it says China has expanded its crackdown on civil society to those who are lesser known. Yeah, that's going to probably happen in America as well, isn't it? They already started disappearing people from the streets. Do you remember that? The authorities, we don't even know who they were. The National Guard, we don't even know who they were because they were in unmarked uniform and unmarked vehicles, just rented vehicles. And they were disappearing people off the streets of Portland. Do you remember that story? Oh, yeah. Just like the Nazis or the Stasi used to do, Disappearing people off the streets of Portland during the during the BLM. I mean, I actually thought, because that phrase, to use that language to disappear someone, we don't really say that in normal vernacular, do we? But it is used to describe the way that authoritarian governments remove people from a scene or from society. And the fact that the Trump government was disappearing people off the streets of Portland was like a whole new level of autocracy. And it was one of the most terrifying things I ever saw, because there's video of it. I wouldn't mind if it happened in secret. People were filming it. And so they were arresting people, but they weren't putting them under arrest. They were bundling them into unmarked cars, driving them away, and then some of them you never knew what happened to them. I mean, some of them were actually released a few blocks away, taken away, and others were taken to police stations and arrested. For what? Peaceful protest. That actually happened here in America. What was it, 2 years ago? Have you looked it up, Carla? It's I'm just trying to remember. Oh. Yeah. It was in Portland, Oregon. Disappearing people in unmarked vehicles. And then, of course, you had the Lafayette Square event that took place when Trump wanted to pose with the Bible. Do you remember, outside the church, which he'd evacuated, or, people had been caused to flee? And that time they used, tear gas and low-buzzing helicopters to move Americans away. This is the first time that the American government used weapons, biological weapons, on their own citizens. It's beggars belief, isn't it? It's beggars belief. Unmarked car, Portland. There you go. Federal officers use unmarked vehicles to grab people. It was in July 2020. Federal officers, in the early hours of Wednesday, this was after a night spent protesting, Mark Pettibone and his friend Connor O'Shea decided to head home. It had been a calm night compared with most protesting downtown. By 2 a.m., law enforcement hadn't used any tear gas, with only a few exceptions. Both the Portland, Oregon Police Bureau and federal law enforcement officers had stayed out of sight. Meanwhile, a block west of Chapman Square, these guys bumped into a group warning them that people in camouflage were driving around the area in unmarked minivans, grabbing individuals off the street. They'd barely made it half a block when an unmarked minivan pulled up in front of them. "I see guys in camo," O'Shea said. 4 or 5 of them pop out, open the door, and it was just like, and I don't know who you are or what you want with us. It says federal law enforcement officers have been using unmarked vehicles to drive around downtown Portland and detain protesters since at least Tuesday. Personal accounts and multiple videos posted online show the officers driving up to people, detaining individuals with no explanation about why they're being arrested, and driving off. The tactic appears to be another escalation in federal force deployed on Portland city streets, as federal officials and President Trump have said they plan to quell nightly protests outside the federal courthouse, which have carried on for 6 weeks. It was the U.S. Marshals Special Ops Group and U.S. Customs and Border Protection Border Patrol Tactical Unit, all wearing camo but with no insignia. So they had no names, they had no badges, nothing. They were unmarked officers in unmarked cars. It's terrifying. And I'm not saying, this could happen. This already happened in July 2020. It already happened. And I just don't know why it doesn't get enough coverage. I mean, it did get quite a lot of coverage at the time, but since, no one's really mentioned it. And this really worries me. Because, that level of authoritarianism is fascism, and it is already happening. And then using tear gas in Lafayette Square to disperse people peacefully protesting there as well, so Trump could get his photo op, was just as bad. They buzzed a military helicopter really low in the crowds to scare people. Yeah, it's kidnapping. They kidnap people. That's what they did. This is the world that we live in now, where the government kidnapping you on the streets, which is the kind of thing that happens in Russia, right? When people go missing, or Jamal Khashoggi, a journalist, goes into a Turkish bar and gets assassinated by the Saudi government, or a Russian is in London eating in a sushi restaurant that is spiked with polomia. Is that what it was called? Yeah, polomian. I mean, or that Russian father and daughter, walking through the streets of southern England, suddenly both taken ill and poisoned with a dart or something. I mean, it's like, it just happens now, and it's just like considered to be okay or acceptable or normal. I mean, still nobody faced prosecution for that decision. And that's what's going to happen again, and it'll end up being that all, not just protesters, but any Democrat who's publicly a Democrat is probably going to get arrested. The caption, this is another story, racist texts among cops uncovered. Interviews records reveal the name of 12 Torrance officers in a scandal that threatens many criminal cases. This is just an extension of the same conversation, isn't it? It's just an extension of the same conversation, day after day. The caption reads, yeah. Okay, well, there's some graphic stuff here, so I'll try and be sparing with how much I read out. But the caption read, hanging with the homies. The picture above it showed several black men who'd been lynched. Another photo asked what someone should do if their girlfriend was having an affair with a black man. The answer, according to the caption, was to break a tail light on his car so the police can stop him and shoot him. The comments represent, there's a bunch more, which I'm not going to read. The comments represent a sliver of a trove of racist text messages exchanged by more than a dozen current and former Torrance police officers and recruits. Through interviews with sources with direct knowledge of the investigation, public record requests, and a review of District Attorney Office records, the Los Angeles Times examined some of the contents of the until now secret texts and identified a dozen Torrance police officers under investigation for exchanging them. The broad scope of the racist text conversations, which prosecutors said went on for years, has created a crisis for the Torrance Police Department and could jeopardize hundreds of criminal cases in which officers either testified or made arrests. I mean, look, I have a theory, and I mean, it's not an accurate theory, but it's my theory and it's my opinion. And Harper, good morning. Stacey, good morning. She's having burrito chips and chocolate chip cookies today, just to lighten the mood for just a moment. And hopefully plenty of coffee. I have a theory, when like Trump or Biden or most, any leaders have said, most police are good people and it's only 1% of police that are bad people. I actually think that statistic is the wrong way round. Like literally the wrong way round. I think 99% of the police are bad people and 1% of the police are good people. And that's just my opinion. Because I think that to want to be a police officer in this day and age, it will attract a certain kind of candidate. And especially if you're working for a police force that issues firearms, because I'm from a country where the police don't carry firearms. So it's, to me, it just seems crazy that you would want to have that power. Even yesterday when I took my daughter to get her COVID vaccine, The security guard standing on the door was a very overweight man who looked very tired, and he had a firearm, a gun, right there in his holster. And I just thought to myself, you are not fit enough or awake enough to be in control of that firearm. Like, you shouldn't have it. And this is why people get killed all the time here, is because, like, the wrong people are carrying guns, and they're just used like, oh yeah, just pop a gun on that guy, it's fine. Anyway, just back to this subject. The officers' comments spared no color or creed. They joked about gassing Jewish people, assaulting members of the LGBTQ community, using violence against suspects, and lying during an investigation into a police shooting, according to District Attorney office records reviewed by The Times. Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, this is the point, is that a lot of these have given testimony, haven't they? And in the process of giving testimony, you know, they've all got each other's backs, and so they'll all just have the same story. They'll all just lie through their teeth. You know, to understand how racist this kind of law enforcement system is, you really have to kind of forget all of your preconceptions, because there is very little training. There is very little firearms training. There is very little de-escalation training. There's a little bit, a couple of days here and there, a few hours here and there. But in terms of the training that would be required to change an entire generation of systemic racism through these candidates, you would have to literally reprogram people's brains. Imagine growing up black in America. Just for a second. I mean, think about it, you know? And the friends I have who had, they're almost too scarred to even talk about it. Because, you know, you just fear for your life. And so, and any time you come into contact with authority, you would fear for your life. And this type of story about these 12 Torrance officers is just more evidence that minority groups are at risk of suffering, if not loss of life, from white police officers. Yeah. Frequently, hateful comments were targeted at black people. Officers called black men savages, and several variations of the N-word, according to documents. The officers also shared instructions of how to tie a noose and a picture of a stuffed animal being lynched inside Torrance's police headquarters, according to the documents. It says, while no officers currently face criminal charges in direct relation to the text messages, the racist exchanges have led to the dismissal of at least 85 criminal cases involving the officers implicated in the scandal. So these officers are still working for the Torrance police force. Still working there. Which means that, you know, they're referring to savages. I mean, the system is savage, isn't it? The system is savage to allow these people to continue working. And this all goes back to the police unions, the protections, the contracts that police officers sign that are union contracts with the police force. They offer all of these protections against prosecution. Which is why, you know, people that are unsavory are attracted to the police service, because they want to get away with murder, literally. It's 9:24. This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. Davey, Harper, Stacey, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Also, we've got a thumbs up on YouTube. I'm not sure who it's from, because it's just a kind of weird username, but hello. Stacey says they should have been suspended or fired. Well, yeah, but not just... I mean, I just don't think being fired from your job is a punishment. But that's what they do here. At the worst, they fire people. I remember when Derek Chauvin executed... what's his name? George Floyd. He was fired. Like, they've just fired him. Like, that's the punishment. And it's like, hang on. Like, That is not a punishment. To lose your job is not a punishment. You have to be investigated and prosecuted, and isn't it crazy that when the Derek Chauvin trial happened, we were all on tenterhooks because we didn't know if he was going to be convicted or not, even though it was on video, even though it was filmed, all 9 minutes of it. This is the George Floyd trial with Derek Chauvin, the police officer, Derek Chauvin. We didn't know if he was going to get convicted or not, even though the execution was on video. And it's the same with Ahmaud Arbery as well. You know, you didn't know if these guys were going to get off or not because the criminal justice system is so unjust in these types of cases, if they ever go to court. Anyway, I mean, it's just beggars belief, really. So that's the Times investigation on the front of the Los Angeles Times. Interviews, records reveal name of 12 Torrance officers in a scandal that threatens many criminal cases for this Thursday morning, December 9. Pfizer touts its booster in COVID fight. They say a third shot may provide important protection against the new Omicron variant, the drug maker said. And finally, Texas rural strategy, just lose by less. This is Beto O'Rourke, hopes to pave country inroads for Democrats in run for governor. It says nobody expects Beto O'Rourke to win Comanche County in the Texas gubernatorial race, least of all Beto O'Rourke. Nestled in rolling hills 2 hours southwest of Dallas-Fort Worth, this patchwork of cotton and hayfields, cattle ranches, and the occasional town is rock-ribbed Republican territory. 85% of voters backed President Trump last year. So when O'Rourke pitched his candidacy to 15 of the county's remaining Democrats, pitched his candidacy to 15 of the county's remaining Democrats gathered at a roadside diner, he floated a seemingly modest goal: build from Joe Biden's lopsided loss here to a slightly less lopsided 20-80. It's very interesting. I mean, I suppose that's the only way, isn't it, for Democrats to make any headway in these Republican territories, is just to chip away very slowly, you know, and take a kind of long-term view. Interesting. It says, as O'Rourke launches his second statewide campaign in 4 years, he's hoping a go-everywhere approach will both win him the governorship and help thaw the icy reception in the countryside for candidates with a D behind their names. So there we go. That's the LA Times this morning. Let's move on. What's next? The New York Times. We're jumping from coast to coast here. They lead with a where the despairing learn ways to die. This is a 17-year-old in suburban Dallas struggled with remote schooling during the pandemic last year. He grew increasingly despondent. Searching online, he found a website about suicide. Oh, yeah, this is this story that's really been starting to circulate now that we are, nearly 2 years into the pandemic. The website has the trappings of popular social media, a young audience, and explicit content on suicide that other parts of the internet don't allow. It's linked to a long line of lives cut short, where the despairing learn ways to die. Wow. I mean, that's really what's happened, isn't it? You know, there is this huge knock-on effect to people being isolated at home and not integrating. And, blame the pandemic because it's happening in every country. It's not exclusive to America. Pfizer suggests booster shields against variant, as was on the front of the LA Times. Here on the New York Times, a little more information. It says Pfizer and BioNTech said on Wednesday that laboratory tests suggest a booster shot of their coronavirus vaccine offers significant protection against the fast-spreading Omicron variant of the virus. So, interesting. Very interesting. Enjoying the music today. We've got a very nice selection of tunes here, haven't we? No, I was kind of enjoying it. A nice collection of tunes. We're just like slowing it all down. Season, thank you for joining us. Davey's back with us again. Thank you. Pfizer and BioNTech said on Wednesday laboratory tests suggest a booster shot of their coronavirus vaccine offers significant protection against Omicron. The company said the tests of blood from people who had received only 2 doses found much lower levels of antibodies protecting against Omicron than against an earlier version of the virus. That suggests that 2 doses may not be sufficient to protect against infection by the new variant. I mean, this is very interesting, isn't it? And just with my conspiracy theorist hat on, which is a very small hat, I don't wear it very often, but I thought the whole point of the booster was to maintain your immunity. So the first dose gives you like 60%, then the second dose gets you up to like 85%, and then the 85% is the number that wanes over 6 months, and then the booster takes you back up to 85%. It doesn't take you above that. Do you see what I mean? That was what my thinking of this. And I can assure you, when it comes to Moderna, they haven't released their data yet, because Pfizer always seem to be a little bit quicker. But I'm sure it'll be the same with Moderna, because it's the same tech, the mRNA vaccine, which the anti-vaxxers refer to as gene therapy, because they haven't read the science or indeed care for it. They just listen to lunatics. And I've had a Moderna booster, so I would like to think that I have protection from Omicron, but, who only knows? There's more evidence coming out to say that Omicron is actually quite mild. The thing that's the issue with it is that it does spread faster, travels faster, potentially. And also, they haven't really done... I think, talking about long COVID as another thing. Here's the thing that I found very interesting that I read. If you have long COVID, i.e. you've had COVID and you've not been able to shake some of the symptoms for a long period of time, a year, if you get vaccinated, that is going to improve your chances of recovering. And some patients have seen that after they've had the mRNA vaccine, having had long COVID, that actually cures them from those foggy brain or muscle ache or whatever it was that they were suffering from for an extended period, which suggests to me that the reason this mRNA vaccine is so clever is because it knows exactly what it's looking for. And even once the body has been invaded by the COVID virus, it can then go in and do its thing. It's very clever. And that's why it makes me so sad at all of these people poo-pooing this vaccine because they don't get it, they don't understand it, and then some lunatic has written something on the dark web saying that it's gene therapy or it's microchipping you. Microchips don't yet come that small. They haven't thought of it. Do you know how small the needle is? I went for a flu shot yesterday. Sat next to my daughter while I had my flu shot and she had her COVID vaccine, and it did not go well. Did not go well. She was furious. She'd scream when she saw me having mine. That was a mistake. I thought that me having mine first was going to be like a really good thing, It would mean that she would she would see that it didn't hurt me, and therefore hers wouldn't hurt her, and it didn't go like that at all. She tried to run out of the room, screaming. Took like 20 or 30 minutes to console her, to get her to a place where Jennifer, the woman who was administering the vaccine, could even get close with the needle. We've got to go again now after Christmas for her second dose. I had a little reaction to the flu jab last night. I was quite pleased because, if you have an immune response, then that means that it's working. Your body is making antibodies to fight the flu virus, the little dose of flu virus that they've given you. And so I felt a little bit rubbish. I took a couple of Tylenol, and I took some zinc and vitamin C, and I went to bed and I felt fine until I got woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning with the sound of dripping as my ceiling started to leak again. This is my life that I'm sharing with you. tunes this morning. It's so good. 9:35. This is Backchannel. It's Thursday morning, the 9th of December. Good morning. Welcome to the show. We're looking at the New York Times this morning. Adams selects longtime ally to run schools. This is David C. Banks, longtime New York City educator who rose to prominence after creating a network of public all-boys schools, has been chosen by Mayor-elect Eric Adams to be the next chancellor of New York City's public school system, the nation's largest, according to several people with knowledge of the matter. So there we go. It's also on the front of the New York Times today. And apps aid millions in unlocking government aid. This is interesting. This makes programs like food stamps more accessible. I mean, I was saying this the other day. Do you remember we were discussing this new technology that Pavilions, or was it Albertsons, is trialing? Like it's a cart that's got a screen and a pin pad on it. And I was just like, no, what are you doing? Like, why would you invest in this old-fashioned technology, which is just going to be obsolete in like 20 minutes, when everybody has a smartphone? The smartphone has got a camera on it, so you can scan. It's got near-field communications, so you can tap and you can pay. And it's got the ability to enable shoppers to scan items off the shelf with their app, whatever the Albertsons app, add it to cart, put it in your actual cart, ideally already in a bag. If the bag's already in the cart, put it in the bag, and then you just check out on your phone and you leave. And you turn all of the people that were working on the checkouts into helper-outers who just walk around the store and just help people as they're doing their checkout to make sure that it works. They can just count the items. I saw a fascinating piece of equipment in a clothing store the other day. Fascinating. They called it a frequency machine, I think, because I was looking for a certain size pair of jeans, and they weren't able. I couldn't find it, with my naked eyes. And so he said, I'll just go and get the radio machine. And he came with this bleeper, and he pointed it across the shelves where the jeans were, and it went red, 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 and it went green, 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 and it found the jeans. And I was like, this is incredible. I've got to get me one of these at home so I can find clothes. It was able to read barcodes through frequency. Wasn't even looking at them. It was just blew my mind. So, this is what we're dealing with now. The technology is really at such a great place that the idea of having like a huge screen on your cart is just so dated. I'm definitely going to write to Albertsons. Maybe I'll just do a tweet. And I'll be like, this is the stupidest, silliest idea. So stupid. Such a waste of money. But, America does this sometimes. I've seen it time and time again. It embraces a technology that they think is new, and actually, because they don't look outside to the rest of the world, they don't realize that the rest of the world has tried that and moved on a long time ago. I think it has been like that with like cycle hire and various, things that you could rent on the street. America is such a huge country. Almost ignores what's happening. They'll go, it's being trialed in another state, and that's good enough for them. But, try other countries and see what's been trialed and then dropped. Mark's with us. Roland's with us. Stacey says technology is amazing, especially when you can use it to help yourself. I agree. Just like putting stuff in a car and then putting it on the conveyor belt and then putting it back in the cart. Just makes no sense. You could do that in one go. And the only reason they've stuck with that is because that's like how legacy systems worked, There's a lovely photograph on the front of the New York Times this morning of some manatees. Do you say manatees or manatees? Maybe manatees. Malnourished from a lack of food, the mammals are in need of a handout from humans. That's just more climate change, isn't it? That manatees can't feed in the wild because of the temperature. Or let me go back to the food stamp story just for a second. It says, in making his case that safety net programs should be easier to use, Jimmy Chen, a tech entrepreneur, recalled visiting a welfare office where people on food stamps endured long waits to submit routine paperwork. They passed the time, as people in lines do, staring at their phones, which had the potential to do the work online with greater convenience, accuracy, and speed. The image of aid seekers wasting time with a solution, literally in hand, captures what critics call an overlooked challenge for people in poverty. Administrative burdens make benefits hard to obtain and tax the time and emotional resources of those who need help. It says too much bureaucracy prevents people from getting the help they need. So Mr. Chen, whose startup Propel offers a free app that 5 million households now use to manage their food stamp benefits. It says barriers to aid are as old as aid itself, and they exist for reasons as varied as concerns about fraud, the bureaucratic tension between accuracy and speed, and hostility toward people in need. Excuse me. So, there it is. I mean, this is what we're dealing with now, you know? We're kind of dealing with a... How do I describe it? We're kind of dealing with a... See, people don't understand that you can be poor, live in poverty, and still have a smartphone. And this really frustrates me. Now, we used to make the same argument with flat-screen TVs about 20 years ago. Do you remember? People used to complain, how is it that all these people who are living off the state and living in poverty, they've all got a big flat screen. They used to talk about flat screen because that was like the differential between the CRT television. You know, 20 years ago when people started to get flat screens. The wealthy were furious with the poor for having access to flat screen televisions. They couldn't understand it. And I never understood the argument because, you know, a television has become so cheap now. And a smartphone has become so cheap now. And on the used and second-hand market, these things are given away for free. So to question why the poor are using smartphones when actually it's their only access to the outside world. You know, they might not be able to afford a broadband connection at home because they haven't got a home. So don't deny them a smartphone. Just, it's unfair. The first thing you should have if you're poor is a smartphone. The first thing. Because then it gives you access, in this case, to this app, which enables you to get access to food stamps, but also to contact the services that you need help with without having to kind of look them up. You know, in an old-fashioned way, like in a phone book, you could just search on Google. The poor should all have smartphones, and I'm talking about even people who are unhoused, living on the street in tents. Most of them have smartphones, and it's essential. And yet, the aggrieved wealthy, they somehow have taken it upon themselves to think that there is this grievance associated with allowing the poor to have access to smartphones. To them, it's a contradiction of their poverty. And it's completely misguided because, you know, a smartphone can be had as an exchange. Go into any pawnbroker. You exchange your guitar for a smartphone. People leave smartphones. People throw them away. If you're scavenging through a bin, you'll find a smartphone that works perfectly well. And look, I can go on Amazon and I can buy a fully functioning Android smartphone for about $80. You know, which on the used market will be $30. So please, it's very important that we don't stigmatize the poor for needing communication. And some of these things now, some of these services that you access, excuse me, can only be accessed with a smartphone or with an online, you know, with a connection. And I've started to really feel like we're now living in a time where, because this has been happening in England, you know, there are certain services now that you can only that you can only access online. So like we used to go to the post office and we would do certain services there. And the post office stopped doing those services because they were moved onto the internet, like getting, tax for your car, which, they call vehicle registration here in America. So it's just a very different landscape that we live in now. Here's a message saying, Alexa suggested Backchannel to me a couple of days ago. Today I got a notice that you were live on YouTube, so I'm trying out here this time. Thank you. You see? I'm so pleased. Yeah, you can find us all over the place. We are everywhere now. YouTube, Echo Show, YouTube. Backchannel.tv is where you can chat. So if you want to send a message, I know you've sent a message via the YouTube comments section, but you can go to backchannel.tv on your smartphone, and you can communicate with me there. And the thing about Backchannel, just so that you're fully aware, is that there's no other show where you can do this, where you can talk back to the host without talking, where you can message the host without typing. This is a voice-activated, interactive show inside your television or inside your Echo Show, and it's completely unique to Amazon and this technology. I'm Anthony Davis. This is The Anthony Davis Show, and we are discussing some of these important issues. Eddie's with us, Tom is with us, Roland, Harper, Mark, Davey, Season, Stacey, of course. So thank you for spending your morning with us here on Backchannel. It's 9:47. I'm on the West Coast in Los Angeles, California, and whoever you are, wherever you are, then welcome. We're here every day having these conversations. We're going to keep looking through the morning papers. If you live in an area where your morning paper is, a local newspaper that you would like me to review, because I like to read from the papers and discuss the subjects that are present, then just shout at me. Just, use your Echo Show device to communicate, as we've just been discussing. Easy to do. Let's take a look. This subject of the idea of the homeless being denigrated because they've got mobile phones. We're gonna talk about that in a bit more detail on another show. But it's becoming a huge thing where the wealthy have more grievances towards the poor than ever before. But at the same time, they're not paying their taxes. They're not taking part in. They're not joining in with society. All they're doing is just leveraging criticism at those beneath them, and that's becoming an increasing problem across the US. So we're going to look at that in more detail on another show. But today we're going to go back to our top topics. We were just looking at the despairing learning ways to die on a suicide website, and also let's jump to the Chicago Sun-Times now, because this has also got a few good stories on the front. Jurors begin weighing actors' fate. Chicago panelists wrap up first day of deliberations early. This is after 5 hours of closing arguments and more than 2 hours of jury deliberations on the 7th day of trial. Jussie Smollett's legal fate remains undetermined. The judge, James Lynn, sent the jury weighing the actor's case home late on Wednesday afternoon with instructions to return Thursday morning. And where is it? Oh, yeah. This guy was in Empire. You remember that show Empire, this actor? He was in the show Empire. He's accused of arranging a phony hate crime attack on himself in downtown Chicago nearly 3 years ago. It's mind-boggling, mind-boggling. The Houston Chronicle. Let me just check if there's anything else on the front of that one, because I think there was one other. The Pfizer story's there as well. Guards versus Omicron. It says experts caution results from small preliminary study. 2 suburban casino pitches win initial okay. Yes, of course, more casinos. That's what we need right now when people are really struggling. Just, gamble your money away. People rarely win. So that's the Chicago Tribune this morning. Let's go to Houston, Texas now, and the Houston Chronicle. Historic military reforms pass U.S. House. It says bill driven by Guillen's death would yank commanders' power in rape and murder cases. Congress is on the verge of passing sweeping reforms to how the military handles claims of crimes, including sexual assault, rape, and murder. Changes spurred by the killing of Army Sergeant Vanessa Guillen in Texas, including removing decisions on whether to prosecute service members from the military chain of command. The historic reforms, at least a decade in the making, are included in a $768 billion defense authorization bill passed the House late on Tuesday night with overwhelming bipartisan support, a major victory for the Guillen family, which has spent more than a year calling for changes to address the scourge of sexual assault in the military, where 20,000 assaults are estimated to occur each year. So it's now off to the Senate, that bill. Small Town Lifeline. Staffers hold a hallway meeting at Bayside Community Hospital, and the only hospital for more than 25 miles in any direction. Now, this is something I've learned a lot about since COVID. It's just how few hospitals there are across rural America, and how far people have to drive when they are ill. Forget getting an ambulance, to get an ambulance to come all the way out to you, to go all the way back again. It's just not possible. So relatives are having to drive sick people for, in some cases, an hour to get to the hospital. So this story is talking about a hospital that was built for a bygone era, but the rural facility remains a lifeline for the thousands of residents who travel from all over Chambers County for everything from stitches to childbirth to critical care. They say it's the flanked by the Anahuac Channel on one side and hayfields on the other. It's the only hospital for more than 25 miles in any direction. Biden sets greener goals for Fed entities. It says President Joe Biden on Wednesday set in motion a plan to make the federal government carbon neutral by 2050, ordering federal agencies to buy electric vehicles to power facilities with wind, solar, and nuclear energy, and to use sustainable building materials. So we've discussed that a few times. So there we go. That's the Houston Chronicle this morning. Stacey says, I'm looking out for what's on the San Antonio Express. Well, so are we, Do not fear. As soon as it's available, we'll get it, we'll bring it to you, and we'll make it part of the show, because that's what we do here. San Antonio Express leads with a story about Billboard touts judgment that wasn't. State bar eases rules governing how lawyers advertise. Wow. It says the Billboard towers over Interstate 35, just north of downtown San Antonio, trumpeting a $1.25 billion verdict judgment that personal injury lawyer Thomas J. Henry secured for an alleged victim of sexual assault. A court ruling that large normally would generate reams of publicity. Yet, the San Antonio case escaped attention for almost 3 years until Henry suddenly began promoting the result on a billboard and elsewhere. Henry likely never would have publicized the 2018 judgment if the State Bar of Texas had not eased the rules governing how lawyers advertise. Since July 1st, lawyers no longer have to disclose in advertisements how much a client received from a verdict or settlement. That allowed Henry to omit from the billboard that he didn't actually put anything in his client's pocket. The client, who was 6 at the time of the alleged assault, is now 22. He said he never received so much of a penny from the judgment. I haven't gotten anything, he said, adding that he found the billboard upsetting. I mean, this is so offensive. So it's got a photograph of Thomas J. Henry, who's the lawyer, and it says $1.25 billion, sexual assault injury to a minor, verdict judgment. So let's be clear about this. The lawyer is advertising his lawyer skills on a giant billboard saying that he won $1.25 billion for a sexual assault case on a minor, and the minor, who is now 22, said, "I never got a penny." That's what we're dealing with here. America. Land of billboards and misinformation. I mean, there's a lot of lawyers like this. I mean, what was the name of that really very charismatic and handsome lawyer that got done recently in a was it Adidas or one of these fashion brands that ended up suing him or something? But wasn't he? Oh, he was Stormy Daniels' lawyer. Do you remember? And he finally went to jail, and he was they were saying that he was like going to be run for governor or something, or be a presidential candidate. I mean, he was very charismatic. I forget his name now, but he eventually got done for some fraudulent activity. It was very interesting. $6.3 million fuels plan to quell domestic violence, also on the front of the San Antonio Express News. It says a month after an Express News investigation put a spotlight on the problem, Bexar County officials on Wednesday unveiled proposals to spend up to $6.3 million to counter a surge in domestic violence by hiring more prosecutors and tracking technology to protect victims of abuse from being ambushed by their abusers. And then Pfizer finds 3-dose fight-off variant. Pfizer and BioNTech said on Wednesday that laboratory tests suggest that 3 doses of their coronavirus vaccine offer significant protection against the fast-spreading Omicron variant of the virus. There's going to be a lot of people saying, well, they would say that, wouldn't they? This is a very narrow study, by the way. Oh, Stacey says America is also land of troublemakers. You know, I don't even think it's troublemakers. I think it's land of opportunists. Because, you know, America really is the land of opportunity. And the downside to that is that it does enable opportunists. And if there is a huge economy and a huge pot of money to tap into, people will stop at nothing to get access to that. And they will do very well before they go to jail. Sorry, Carla, what was that? Oh, Michael Avenatti, that's right. Yes, Michael Avenatti was the very charismatic lawyer of Stormy Daniels. He eventually got done. What was the fashion brand? Was it Adidas or Nike? It was Nike. Okay, yeah. He had some case with Nike and he lost. So it's very interesting, isn't it, how people 1 minute can be like the talk of the town and the next minute can be literally like behind bars. I just don't think it's worth it. You know, I'd rather just earn like an average wage and know that I was not taking any risks with my livelihood or my life, you know? And I think at the moment you have children, this takes on an even bigger thing, because the odds of being separated from your kids, it's just terrifying. A reminder that Volley has a growing list of shows, including Haley and Allison Live, waking you up in the morning with lots of laughs and their 1-star cinema review. Also Live Every Day with Liv Harrison. She's live from Texas. She'll be celebrating the little things in life with plenty of tea. And what about the charming and funny Hal Rudnick? His show Your Pal Hal takes place in an hour here on Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. We're going to present the US News Update in just a minute or so. It's a little podcast that I do every day that enables you to hear the news in a bite-sized chunk. So, we'll get that in just a second as well. And then we'll jump onto the Morning Call and the Miami Herald, and we'll take a look at some of the bigger news stories, including the Elaine Maxwell trial, which has been suspended. So we're going to take a look at what's been happening there in just a few moments as well. So, are we ready with the US News Update? We'll give it a whirl. We've got new technology today, so we'll see if it works. Anyway, here it is. Here's the podcast. It's Thursday, December 9. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US news update. I'm Anthony Davis. US job openings surged in October while hiring decreased, suggesting a worsening worker shortage, which could hamper employment growth and the overall economy. The Labour Department's monthly job openings and labour turnover survey, or JOLTS report on Wednesday, also showed a steady decline in layoffs, another sign that the jobs market was tightening. While the number of people voluntarily quitting their jobs fell, it still remained quite high. Under normal circumstances, a near-record number of job openings would be something worth celebrating, said Jennifer Lee, a senior economist at BMO Capital Markets in Toronto. But no employer is in a celebratory mood. It's difficult to fill orders or meet customer demands if there are not enough people to do the actual work. Job openings, a measure of labour demand, increased by 431,000 to 11 million on the last day of October. This was the second highest on record. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, could become the third person to face a criminal contempt charge for refusing to cooperate with the U.S. House of Representatives panel probing the deadly January 6 attack on the Capitol. Representative Benny Thompson, chairman of the House Select Committee, said the Select Committee is left with no choice but to advance contempt proceedings and recommend that the body in which Mr. Meadows once served refer him for criminal prosecution. Meanwhile, the U.S. government plans to end purchases of gas-powered vehicles by 2035 in a move to lower emissions and promote electric cars under an executive order signed by President Joe Biden on Wednesday. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel. There it is. That's the US News Update. It's a daily podcast. You can download it from wherever you get your podcasts from. It's called US News Update with Anthony Davis. This is the Anthony Davis Show here on Backchannel. It's 2 minutes after 10 Pacific, 2 minutes after 1 Eastern. And thank you for joining us here. We are here every morning at the same time. If you would like to join in tomorrow, then I'll be here for you. And we'll just do that as time goes on. Eddie's with us, Tom, Harper, Mark, Roland, Season, Stacey, Davey, thank you for spending your morning with us here on Backchannel, or your afternoon if you're elsewhere in the country. We've been looking at the newspapers. The San Antonio Express News was the last one. But we're going to move on because, moving forward is kind of what this show's all about. We've done the San Antonio Express News. I think that's kind of pretty much finished now. So let's take a little look at some of our bigger subjects. Oh, no, hang on. The Morning Call from Pennsylvania. I've been asked to do that. That has a headline, Lehigh County resident designs new district map. Oh, yes, that's right. We're going to talk about redistricting a little bit later, so this is a subject that's definitely worth mentioning. It says the long-awaited redistricting process in Pennsylvania kicked into high gear on Wednesday as House Republicans released proposed new congressional districts. But immediate reaction to the initial map was decidedly mixed. It says the map was chosen from 19 citizen submissions and was drawn by former Lehigh County Republican Commissioner Amanda Holt. She became a well-known redistricting activist a decade ago and was a plaintiff in a successful case against previous state and Senate maps. I mean, this is the tragedy of redistricting, that, in many of these, certainly red states, they try and redistrict it to split up communities into white and black, or Latino and white, so that they can get more votes from the people that are more likely to support them. Now, both sides do it. This is not something exclusive to Republicans. But Republicans are going to extreme lengths to make changes. The tunes are so good this morning. Loving it. Also, on the front of the Morning Call this morning, both sides argue before High Court over whether state school mask order is legal. It says a lawyer for Pennsylvania's acting health secretary on Wednesday defended the validity of the secretary's order requiring masks in K-12 schools to fight COVID-19, asking state Supreme Court justices to focus on a single regulation. It says if this court finds that the masking order falls outside of that, then we lose, said Senior Deputy Attorney General Sean A. Kirkpatrick during oral arguments over a lawsuit seeking to invalidate the masking order. I mean, this is the tragedy of this, isn't it? That masks stop you from getting coronavirus. Masks have been used for hundreds of years. You know, would you like to have a surgeon operate on you and not wear a mask? Would you be very happy to have open heart surgery and him having breathing on you? No. So why force children to go without? It's so offensive to me. And the kids don't care, the kids just don't care. The people that care are the kind of right-wing extremist views of their parents, indoctrinating their kids into thinking that mask wearing is bad. During a worldwide pandemic, when the entire world are wearing masks to stop transmission and infection and reinfection. No, the feeling is liberty. It's not that they've been told masks don't work, although they don't think they work. It's to do with liberty and freedom. They believe that they're having their freedom compromised because they're being mandated. They don't want to be mandated. They feel like they're standing up for themselves. It's just beggars belief. Yeah, that's right. There is some kind of misinformation out there claiming that masks are actually, prevent children from, living their fullest life and from learning and all that stuff. And it's just not true. Just apply a little common sense here for a second. What's worse? Yeah. The conspiracy theorist claim is that they'll get less oxygen, and in the process of less oxygen, they're therefore compromised in their ability to learn. It's nuts. So that's the Lehigh Valley's morning call. Finally, we have the Miami Herald. This is the last one on our paper review before we jump into these conversations about Elaine Maxwell. Melinda Gates spending big to get women in tech. It says a national effort backed financially by billionaire philanthropist Melinda French Gates to advance gender equity in the technology industry is coming to Miami. Called the Gender Equality in Tech Gates Pivotal Ventures, said it plans to bring the initiative here as part of the company's broader $50 million investment in gender equality in tech. Pivotal Ventures officials declined to disclose the amount that will be spent in Miami, yet the goal of Get Miami was to place more women, particularly those of color, into education and internship programs to prepare them for careers and leadership roles in Miami's burgeoning tech sector. Also a photograph of, because there's a whole conspiracy about Bill and Melinda Gates, don't you? The whole COVID thing. People believe that they are the puppet masters of this whole conspiracy theory. It's like, really? Maybe it's jealousy. People are just jealous of people that got successful and wealthy, and so the only way they can take their anger out on that is to kind of blame them for a worldwide pandemic. There's a photograph of Narissa Alcindor, who's 19, formerly homeless, now working towards opening her own salon, going to school full-time and working. It's a photograph of her, looking very chilled and happy, with her hair straighteners and hair dryer and her amazing nails. Once homeless teen needs help to pursue her dream. This is part of the Miami Herald Wish Book. It says, she's always had big expectations for herself, even in the most dire of circumstances. Ever since she was a baby, Alcindor was moved in and out of foster care and later bounced from friends' homes, hotels, and shelters to keep a roof over her head. At 17, she found herself completely on her own. facing steep barriers to graduating high school, acquiring a job, or even renting an apartment. But with the help of non-profit Casa Valentina, she accomplished all of those milestones, plus her biggest dream of all, attending cosmetology school. So this is a kind of campaign, I think, to support, people who have turned their life around. And then also, and finally, on the front page of the Miami Herald, and this is the story that we're going to discuss, it says, key Maxwell accuser not going to testify. This is very interesting, because I assume that Virginia Giuffre was actually one of the main characters in this whole in this whole charade. It says the prosecution in the Ghislaine Maxwell sex trafficking case is about to rest weeks ahead of schedule, with one of Maxwell's most prominent accusers conspicuously absent from the witness list. Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who has previously cast Maxwell as a central player in Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking operation, apparently isn't going to testify, even though she's been mentioned by witnesses and prosecutors almost daily during the trial, as a minor who visited Epstein's homes multiple times, as a girl who had sex with Epstein in front of a trembling underage girl, as a victim who was allegedly recruited by Maxwell, and as a teenager who flew on Epstein's private plane, often with Maxwell, 32 times. Does it say why? I'm just looking. Giuffre's lawyer is as mystified as anyone else as to why federal prosecutors have selected a narrow set of women to testify. Interesting. Experts say it's more difficult to prosecute a case involving victims who were close to the age of consent. Oh, I see. Maybe she was just like a little bit too old. Anyway, let's take a look at this story this morning. The trial has been suspended due to an illness in the case of Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking trial. One of the lawyers has been taken ill. The U.S. District Judge, Alison Nathan, announced the recess today in Manhattan Federal Court, saying she'd been informed of the lawyer's illness. The judge said there was no reason to believe it was COVID-related. We want to make sure the attorney is taken care of rather than pause and delay, she said. I expect to resume tomorrow. The prosecution has been expected to rest its case on Thursday after calling the fourth and final accuser to testify that Maxwell lured her into sex with Jeffrey Epstein. Maxwell's defense team has said earlier that it has not yet decided whether it would call any witnesses. Interesting. I don't know. I get the feeling that this is a very cut and dry case. I'm pleased to see that the U.S. District Judge is female. I think that's very important. I think that because Jeffrey Epstein effectively got off, by taking his own life, or, there is a conspiracy theory that he was murdered, but, by taking his own life in jail, Epstein will never now face the consequences of this, or face his abuse, face his victims. And so I think that's very important. And I think it's very important for Ghislaine Maxwell to face the victims, because to all intents and purposes, she is placed in every location where Epstein is located. Wherever he goes, she is with him. All of the girls, and I've watched several documentaries on this, they all say that she was the one that was the fixer. She was the one that met the girls. She was the one that vetted the girls. She was the one that brought them into the home in West Palm Beach. She was the one that basically encouraged them to go and give him a massage and all this stuff. And in some cases, she was involved in the sex acts as well. So, this is what we're looking at now. We're looking at a kind of landscape of a kind of criminal family, this kind of... And incidentally, you may remember that Donald Trump was considering pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell. Do you remember what he said when the trial started, when she was first arrested, He said, I wish her well. He said, I wish her well. It's in Michael Wolff's book, Landslide, The Final Days of the Trump Presidency. It's a very good book, incidentally. it basically said that she was one because he knew her very well. There's so many photographs of him and Elaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein together, all like hanging out and having fun. And do you remember that awful video of Trump like doing this kind of dad dance and like pointing at which girl he wanted to, I don't know. I don't even want to think about it. It makes me feel sick. But I recognize that, they're all very close. And of course, then there's the Prince Andrew connection. He's been served with papers, finally accepted them, and I think he settle out of court already. I think maybe he already made a payment. I seem to remember, but it's very messy. The whole thing is very messy because fundamentally and ultimately, the wealthy have, for decades, for centuries, have bought their way into and around criminal activity. They just pay. Just pay, keep paying. Whether it's paying for sex or paying to get off a charge or paying bail or, whatever. Just pay. Paying expensive lawyers, just pay. So this is the reality these days, isn't it? And so who knows what will happen to Ghislaine Maxwell? I mean, let's be honest, it's pretty much an open and shut case, isn't it? There's photographic evidence. There's so many witnesses. Virginia Giuffre was the girl that was photographed with Prince Andrew, and maybe that's the reason why she's not testifying, because maybe the Prince Andrew connection, maybe it's a term of the settlement with Prince Andrew or something. You know what I mean? Interestingly, I don't know if I mentioned this before, that photograph of her and Prince Andrew was taken in Ghislaine Maxwell's apartment, which is on the same street I used to live on in London. It was just further up. I know exactly where that house is, just further up the street. It's called Kinnerton Street. Isn't that crazy? I never knew she lived there. I grew up in that house. It's just a tiny little 2-bedroom house, like a little mews. And hers was just further up the street. London is a very small place, It's a very small place. So just looking at this story a little bit more, just talking about whether or not you feel like there's ever justice for these types of people. And whether or not the victims... Because the thing that... The grey area that I think about all the time is, let's just say hypothetically that, there is a financial payout. In the case of, Prince Andrew and Virginia Giuffre, there's a financial payout. Some people will look at that and go, well, she got paid, and so, that's all she was really after. And I've always been fascinated at where a victim of crime, where a financial reward in some way goes to settle the heartache associated with being a victim of crime. And we see this with people who die in air traffic accidents, in a plane crash. And the families of the victim get a payout from Boeing in the case of the 737 MAX, And they say, well, it's not enough money to, it's not going to bring them back, but it's something. And I think about this a lot because, there will always be people that will be like, well, they're just in it for the money. And it's like, oh, whoa, rewind, hang on a second. That is totally obviously not the case. But why is it that we use money as the compensation factor? And I'm sure for the victims of Ghislaine Maxwell, the compensation there would be better spent seeing her behind bars. Don't you think that the victims of her crimes would, rather than receive a financial settlement, would much rather see her serve a prison sentence? Because this is why I think there's a bit of a grey area. It's like, is a financial settlement enough recompense for a crime? That's the point I'm making. It's like, can we, emotionally, unless you were to spend the money on psychotherapy, you know? But like, is a crime eradicated just because a huge settlement is made? Obviously not. But this is why, for me, a financial settlement in the case of a crime like this, where it's not a victimless crime. There are plenty of victimless crimes. These crimes have victims. So the point I'm making is that when, let's say hypothetically she gets found guilty and gets put in jail, for the victims, is that enough? Is that the end of it? Or if they were given like $10 million each, would that help? Is the financial element to this a necessary part of the healing process? That's the question I'm kind of asking. And I think about this, I really feel like because money is so corrupting, because it was money that got these kids into this massage room in the first place. Money, everybody has a price. Money is corrupting by its very nature. That money is a bribe, a transaction is a bribe. I will pay you in return for you, massaging Jeffrey. And then money is used again as a emotional settlement tool. And why is money always the contributing factor here? Why, if love and satisfaction were the contributions, then you would massage Jeffrey because you love him. And then you would get... Do you see what I'm trying to say here? It's like the satisfaction of somebody going to jail, your perpetrator going to jail, should be enough if we're looking at this purely on an emotional level. But the moment you talk about it on a financial level, transactional, it almost has to be transactional at both ends. There was a transaction involved to get the girls to come and work for him in his horrific sex house, and then there was a transaction involved in compensating those victims. This is the bone of contention for me. It's like, why does there always have to be a financial aspect to all of these things? And the answer is, I think, because there does. There just does need to be a payment made. That is how we satisfy people in the cases of misdemeanors. That is how we make up for the fact that a crime has been committed. There is a financial reward. There is a settlement. And how else do you settle with people who've lost a child in a plane crash? You compensate them. But you can't compensate them with hugs, because the boss of Boeing is not going to just want to put his arms around people and say sorry. I mean, interestingly, they do want them to say sorry, don't they? The victims always want an apology. And it's often the case that sometimes perpetrators of crimes apologize. I mean, Carl Rittenhouse didn't apologize to the victims of the two people he executed in the street, did he? He said, "I wish it hadn't have happened," but he never really looked the families of the deceased in the eye and say, "I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done that," because that would be admitting that he wasn't doing it in self-defense. These aren't victimless crimes. And Carl Rittenhouse now is making a lot of money from his Fox News interviews and from this kind of new celebrity status that he's enjoying as a murderer. So, I often feel that the corruption of money is such a huge part of this kind of society, the complexity of a modern society, where we make payments to people just to make everything okay again, like a lottery win. I'm not getting a refresh on this. I'm only the last message I had on YouTube was at 9:41. Oh, I see. I hope you're enjoying this. I'd love to know your name, our YouTube viewer, because there's no name here. It just says your name currently is 0x07AF. Maybe that is your name. You know, maybe we're living in a dystopian universe now where we all just get given a code name. Like in Blade Runner. We are practically living in Blade Runner, you know, and Blade Runner was shot in Los Angeles, and there are still Bradbury Building and the tunnel downtown. There are still some locations from Blade Runner that I visit regularly. And but the difference now is that the rest of the city has that kind of Blade Runner feel to it as well, especially during COVID when so much of it was deserted, and it was just so weird. This dystopian universe that we're enjoying now. No new messages on YouTube since my last. Okay, I understand now. Do you want to tell me your name, though? Do you want to have... You can make up a name, just so I can refer to you as something other than 0x07AF. Stacey has to leave. Thank you, Stacey. Appreciate you spending your time with us. She's going for a bath. My name is Hexadecimal for 1967. Oh, well done. That's great. Do you mind if I call you Hex? It's Todd from Arizona. Hello, Todd. Let's take a look at this story about redistricting, because it's something that has been, you know, on the lips of so many people recently off the back of the 2020 census being published. And, you know, the census is really what encourages the redistricting to enable political parties to, like, splice up the states so that money is redistributed and budget is redistributed. It's the process of drawing boundaries for electoral and political districts. And it's usually done every 10 years after the census. And we just had a census. Well, the US Constitution requires each representative in Congress to represent an equal number of citizens and mandates a census to determine the number of citizens and apportion seats to each state. So, you know, and it goes, I think it's Article 1, Section 2 of the US Constitution. It requires that representatives be apportioned among several states according to their respective numbers, and specifies there be at least one representative for every 30,000 citizens. And each state must have at least one representative. And every 10 years, the Census Bureau conducts a nationwide census and informs each state how many seats it will have in the US House of Representatives for the next decade. So individual states have the responsibility of drawing legislative boundaries for congressional districts, as well as for state legislative districts. And in most states, the state legislature redistricts seats, usually subject to concurrence by the state governor. But the problem we've got now is that Trump was replacing state legislatures with conservatives, specifically with conservatives. And when you have a conservative state governor, then these guys are working in cahoots. And so you end up with these very politically imbalanced states. And this is all part of the gerrymandering that's going on to ensure that Republicans win in the midterms and in the next presidential election. And it's being widely documented. They're not doing it in secret because they don't care anymore. And now, you know, some people might say, oh yeah, that's clever. They're just going to guarantee that they win, but it's corruption. Now, 7 states have only a single representative due to low population: Alaska, Delaware, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wyoming. But gerrymandering is this practice of dividing election districts to give special advantages to one group, and usually to give one political party an electoral majority in a large number of districts, while concentrating the opposition's voting strength in the fewest districts possible. And this is done by manipulating the geographic boundaries of electoral districts to create partisan, incumbent protected districts. Now, the Voting Rights Act prohibits voting practices and procedures, including redistricting plans, that discriminate on the basis of race, color, or language minority group. The act also prohibits 16 states, either in full or part, from making changes affecting voting like redistricting plans without establishing that the change does not have a discriminatory purpose or discriminatory effect. And the U.S. Attorney General or the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia may approve the jurisdiction's voting plans. And this is why yesterday it was announced that Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, is suing. Where is it he was suing? Was it Arizona? Oh, let's look it up. Todd is in Arizona. He's also in cyberspace. Here we go. I've got the story here. Texas. Yeah, this was a couple of days ago. It was Texas. It says the Justice Department sued on Monday in federal court challenging Texas Republicans' plans for redrawing congressional and state legislative districts based on new census figures. The lawsuit alleges that the state's new maps, in violation of the Voting Rights Act, deny or abridge the rights of Latino and black voters to vote on account of their race, color, or membership in a language minority group, said Merrick Garland. The maps were drawn with discriminatory intent in some places, in a rushed process, and with an overall disregard for the fact that Texas population growth has been driven almost entirely by black and Hispanic residents. Kevin, thank you for joining us. Nice to know you're back with us, joining the party here. Got so many screens up now. I'm like, whoa! This is the downside to doing all of this on one screen. Here we go. Thank you for all your messages, by the way, everybody. I really appreciate your input, your time, your assistance in making this show possible. It's very much a team effort. So I'm just asking, what is redistricting? Why do we do it? Well, we've looked at that, but why does it matter? Do you feel a sense of, maybe you're all for it, especially if you're a white Republican, you probably think, well, this is great. But at what point do you do you worry for the future of your democracy? And this goes back to what I was saying yesterday about Democrats having the wrong name for their political party. By calling themselves Democrats, that gives democracy a bad name in the eye of Republicans. I actually don't think that many of the Republicans who are involved in this gerrymandering, and possibly more I'm not talking about you as a voter, I'm talking about Republican lawmakers. I don't think they really care for democracy. They just want to win. Winning is all that matters, and at whatever cost, whatever it takes. And even if you have to take the whole process of a modern democracy and turn it on its head, that's fine by them, because they're going to win. And that's when democracy becomes an autocracy and then a dictatorship. And that's when patriotism becomes nationalism, which becomes extremism, which becomes Nazism. So all of these things are already happening. It's not like they're close. It's like it's actually happening in plain sight. And I've said several times on this program, and I'm very happy to repeat myself, that, this type of stuff used to happen by stealth in the dead of night. And now it happens in broad daylight. Like, they're very happy to be seen doing this because nothing is illegal anymore in America. Nothing is illegal. You could literally break into the US Capitol and try and stop an election from being signed off by the vice president and not be prosecuted. And there's a lot of coverage, actually, of why Merrick Garland is taking so long to kind of get off his tush and get into this stuff. So many stories about it. People are furious. Mary Trump, who, is Donald Trump's niece. Big story about her a couple of days ago, where she basically said that the Attorney General Merrick Garland was an idiot for not prosecuting her uncle over the Capitol riot. She said it was dangerous of the Justice Department not to indict her uncle for inciting his followers to violently challenge the certification of Joe Biden's election. And I quote, she said, "The problem is this is the last time it's going to happen. It's literally our last opportunity." She said, "I thought the Department of Justice was supposed to be about justice, but Merrick Garland seems to have deluded himself into believing that by not pursuing this, he's somehow taking the politics out of the Department of Justice." She said, "I have something to say to you then, Mr. Garland. You think it's not a political decision not to pursue, not to investigate the second worst insurrection in US history. I mean, that's not a political decision. And the fact that he doesn't understand that, or he doesn't care, or that he's an institutionalist because apparently that gives you free license to be an idiot," she says. Todd, hello. See, Todd's joined us now on the chat at backchannel.tv, or using an Echo Show device where you can just talk to your device. You say the wake up word, then say, and then your message. Easy. Harper, Kevin, Stacy, Eddie, Tom, Roland, Mark, Davey. Thank you for spending your morning with us here on Backchannel. It's 10:36. You've got me for another 20 minutes or so, and then it's your pal Hal, live from America. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is my theory. Merrick Garland must have something bubbling under the surface. You know, I'm conscious that they can't do everything at once. I personally think voting rights should have been the first thing on the statute book. I don't think that doing infrastructure first was a good idea. I think voting rights first and fighting to get that through would have meant that you are drawing a line under the insurrection and you're saying this is the way it's going to be from now on. But, you know, if Garland is now suing Texas and all red states are effectively doing this, he's just going to end up suing all the red states. The Daily Beast did an article last week. It said, if Merrick Garland doesn't charge Trump and his coup plotters, our democracy is toast. This is an article by David Rothkopf. And it says, the AG is trying to restore norms, but so far he's let the people who shattered them get away without consequence. I mean, I wonder if these articles have any sway. Do you know what I mean? Do you think these articles were really like, is Merrick Garland going to read these articles? And is he going to be like, maybe I am an idiot. Maybe I am going to be the one who goes down in history as allowing democracy to die in America. Because you know that he was, that Merrick Garland was Obama's pick for the Supreme Court. And Mitch McConnell didn't allow it. You know this story. So, Merrick Garland is very experienced. He has what it takes to be a Supreme Court justice. Unlike Amy Coney Barrett, who's never tried a case in her life and somehow managed to get onto the Supreme Court. Or Brett Kavanaugh. Last week, the Department of Justice announced that it would crack down on airline passengers who throw tantrums. Well, now, if Attorney General Merrick Garland would not only get around to doing something about the people who plot the overthrow of the government and a former president who seriously obstructed justice and abused power, we might be getting someplace, says the Daily Beast. Not that in-flight safety isn't important, just like it's important to arrest and prosecute the moron Trumpist foot soldiers who stormed the Capitol on January 6. All that is important, but it's not enough. It says President Joe Biden may get everything else right, but if his administration, starting with the Department of Justice, gets wrong its response to the threats to our democracy posed by Trump and the GOP, nothing else they do may matter. I'm so pleased the Daily Beast has written this, because this is all I've been thinking for the last year, since January the 6th. It says, a widely respected jurist, Garland was picked by Biden to depoliticize the Department of Justice and end the abuses of its power we saw under Trump appointees, Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr. It says certainly he's made some strides in that direction, but if the result of his depoliticization is tiptoeing around the egregious serial wrongdoing of the leaders of the Republican Party, then his efforts will have exactly the opposite effect, the opposite intended effect. It said by failing to hold Trump and co. accountable, Garland will set the stage for them to continue, unabated, their efforts to turn the US into a one-party state, in which only Republicans can win elections, and any tactics they may use to hold on to power will have been effectively validated by the inaction of Garland and his DOJ. I mean, this is effectively going to happen, isn't it? This is effectively going to happen. We're going to be in a situation where only the Republican Party can win because of the gerrymandering and the redistricting and the state legislatures all being conservatives. I really don't get it. It says that Garland has on more than one occasion already taken steps that have actually empowered or emboldened those who currently pose a threat to our system. A particularly egregious example of this was Garland's decision to take the side of Trump by arguing that the former president was acting in his official capacity when he lied and defamed journalist E. Jean Carroll following her accusation that Trump had raped her long before he was elected president. Garland's position was defended by allies who argued that he was an institutionalist who felt it was his duty to defend presidential prerogatives. But what he was actually doing was defending the abuse of power, and however inadvertently demonstrating that our institutions may face no threat quite so grave as that posed by self-anointed institutionalists. Maybe Garland is not the man for the job. And maybe just fundamentally, I mean, Garland is a Republican, I think, isn't he? A lifelong Republican. But maybe this is the issue with Garland, is that fundamentally the Republican Party, although it's publicly, veered to the far right, maybe people like Garland who are just, traditional Republicans, they still cannot stop themselves. They can't help themselves. How do we, what do you think? Do you think in the next 3 years of the Biden presidency, because he has achieved quite a lot in 1 year, if you think about it. But do you think, like next year he's going to be like, right, voting rights, this is what's going to happen now? Because we're very impatient, aren't we? We feel like 4 years is going to disappear so fast. So we're very impatient. But my issue, more than anything, is like, maybe we just need to accept that the Justice Department is going to deal with this, but it's got other stuff to deal with first. And that Biden is going to deal with this. Because, Biden has been very eloquent about the situation and the significance of January 6th on a modern democracy. But because of the separation of power between the executive branch and the Justice Department, he can't phone Merrick Garland and go, what are you doing, mate? Why are you taking so long to do this? The Justice Department has to do it on its own. And if he was to remove Eric Garland and replace him with somebody who was more likely to want to prosecute, then that is no different to how Trump behaved with Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr. So maybe he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's 10:44. This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. As we discuss the effect of not charging Trump and his coup plotters, and whether our modern democracy here in America is finished. It's over. You know, if you can get away with that, then. And the thing is, there's so much digital evidence these days. And this is partly, I guess, why Mark Meadows has now decided not to cooperate with the January 6th committee. There's so much digital evidence where people can be placed in locations, phone calls, text messages, credit card usage, CCTV. There's so much digital evidence. And it's very hard for people to kind of lie their way out of these situations. And of course, anything that goes in and out of the White House has to be recorded, which is why Trump was trying to use presidential privilege to prevent White House records during the insurrection from being released to the January 6th committee. Because he'll be implicated. They'll all be implicated. Because, of course, this was a very organized affair. There's a reason why the National Guard did not show up for 4 hours to prevent the Capitol from being attacked. There's a reason why the police were overwhelmed. There's a reason why the insurrectionists successfully got into the chamber. They knew where to go. And now evidence is coming out that representatives like Lauren Boebert, who took some of these people on a tour the day before, actually, showed them how to do it. There's video of Marjorie Taylor Greene in the lockup, in the safe room, laughing, joking, checking her phone, seeing what was going on upstairs and enjoying it. There's evidence of people, of representatives contacting Trump, senators trying to contact Trump to say, please call this off, and him not doing it. And then eventually making a video. Do you remember the video where he goes, "We love you"? Do you remember the video that he made on the day that wasn't released until 6 p.m.? Apparently, that was like the fourth take. He couldn't get it right because he didn't want to call it off. He wanted them to go to the Capitol. He said it in his rally speech. He said, "I will go with you." Of course, he didn't, because he doesn't do anything like that. It's a bit like when he said he helped out on 9/11. He didn't. He wasn't there. It's like when he managed to get out of serving in the war because of bone spurs. He never went to Vietnam. I mean, these are all Trumpy things, You talk a good talk, but you don't actually do anything. And so, he is now implicated in this crime because it's on video. He made a speech and he talked for effectively 2 years leading up to it, saying, journalists asked him in interviews, if Biden wins the election, will you accept the result? And he said, we'll have to see. And then kept sowing doubt about voter fraud, which simply did not exist. So all of these things contribute to being the person who is instigating the insurrection. But do you know the most damning piece of evidence for me, more than all of this, is every single one of those 600 insurrectionists that were charged with something or were questioned. They all said the same thing. Our president told us to do it. They all said the same thing. We were just following orders from Donald Trump. They were carrying Trump flags. They were wearing MAGA hats. These were his disciples. He was the cult leader who had said, let's go to the Capitol. He used words like, we must be strong and take back our country. And you see, he's very strategic. He purposely doesn't use specific language to implicate himself because he's so used to fighting lawsuits. But, you don't even have to read between the lines because it's every second word. And every one of the insurrectionists says the same thing. We were just doing it for our president. Our president told us to do it, so we did it. Anyway, in the last few minutes of the show, I do want to talk about Grace Hopper, the American computer scientist and U.S. Navy admiral who invented the first compiler for a universal computer programming language, and is credited with coining the phrase debugging. On this day, born on this day in 1906, Grace Hopper, she helped develop a compiler that was a precursor to the widely used COBOL language and became a rear admiral in the U.S. Navy. So I just thought we would celebrate her life in the last few minutes of the show. During World War II, she was assigned to program the Mark I computer. I mean, that was a long time ago. Computers back then were not like the computers we're using now. She continued her work in computing after the war, leading the team that created the first computer language compiler, which led to the popular COBOL language. She resumed active naval service at the age of 60, becoming a rear admiral before retiring in 1986. She was born Grace Brewster Murray in New York City on December 9, 1906. She studied maths and physics at Vassar College, and after graduating in 1928, she proceeded to Yale, where she received a master's degree in mathematics in 1930. That same year, she married Vincent Foster Hopper, becoming Grace Hopper, a name that she kept even after the couple's 1945 divorce. Now, interesting, they divorced the same year that the war ended. Isn't that interesting? I think a lot of people did. You know, people reunited after the war and realized that maybe the other partner had moved on, or they weren't in love anymore. A lot of that happened in 1945. Starting in 1931, Hopper began teaching at Vassar while also continuing to study at Yale, where she earned a PhD in mathematics, becoming one of the first few women to earn such a degree. And after the war, she remained with the Navy as a reserve officer. And as a research fellow at Harvard, she worked with the Mark II and Mark III computers. She was at Harvard when a moth was found to have shorted out the Mark II, and is sometimes given credit for the invention of the term computer bug. Although she didn't actually author the term, she did help popularize it. Is that how the word bug came? Because the moth got inside the computer? I would love to know that's true. That would be great to know that that was true. Wanting to continue her work with computers, Hopper moved into private industry in 1949. First with the Eckert Morchley Computer Corporation, then with Remington, where she oversaw programming for the UNIVAC computer. In 1952, her team created the first compiler for computer language. A compiler renders worded instructions into code that can be read by computers. The compiler was a precursor for the Common Business-Oriented Language, otherwise known as COBOL, a widely adapted language that would be used around the world. And although she didn't invent it, she encouraged its adaptation. Interesting, isn't it? What's the film called? Oh, Hidden Figures. I haven't seen that. I need to watch it. Wow. The movie's called Hidden Figures, about 3 African American women who were responsible for sending white men into space. Just think about that for a minute, you know? Saying she would be bored stiff if she stopped working entirely, Hopper took another job post-retirement and stayed in the computer industry for several more years. She was awarded the National Medal of Technology in 1991, becoming the first female individual recipient of the honor. At the age of 85, she died in Arlington, Virginia. On the 1st of January 1992, she was laid to rest in the Arlington National Cemetery. I mean, this is a very familiar story in my mind, that we start to learn about people that were so influential, and yet they were almost purposely hidden from having celebrity status at the time because they didn't want to upstage white men. Anyway, in 2016, Hopper was posthumously honored with the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Barack Obama. So, it has a happy ending. Listen, thank you for joining me. I've really enjoyed our chats today. I'll come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific and we'll do it again. Sue, Todd, Harper, Kevin, Tom, Eddie, Roland, Mark, Davey, Stacey. Thank you for spending your morning with Backchannel. Stay with us, don't go anywhere, because your pal Hal is next. Have yourself a great Thursday. Bye for now.